And now, Mr. Timer, we will go to our second round of rebuttals. And again, this segment will be 10 minutes. So we will invite Dr. David Wood back to the podium.
I just wanted to compliment Hina briefly on her organizational skills. I've been in lots of debates, and I haven't seen too many people who sort of go point by point and stick to it throughout the debate. It's kind of one person offers an opening statement, and then from then on, it's kind of a free-for-all of anything that pops into anyone's head. And so it just was interesting to be going back and forth, kind of point by point. Hina began by saying that some theists do believe that God causes everything that happens. I didn't deny that. I granted that. What my point was, when we're talking about scientific explanations and how we're bringing God in as kind of a hypothesis to account for something that we just can't account for, the things that atheists say that we were doing that with are almost never the things that anyone has ever done that with. What historically, but before the modern scientific age, people were appealing to God as creator of the universe and as creator of life. These are the things you find in the Bible or in the Quran, and so on. And those are the very issues where we keep finding more and more evidence, not less and less. It's not God getting wedged out. It's the gaps that cannot be filled by anything but God become clearer and clearer. And by the way, you can flip that. You can say it's a kind of chance or an I don't know of the gaps. Anytime we get to something that this is something that can only be accounted for by appealing to a creator or a designer or something like this, and say, well, we don't know everything yet, and or chance explains it. You can do that with all kinds of things. But again, we're not going with gaps in our knowledge. We're saying these are things that we know, and these are things that we know, and here's what is required for these things that we know. As far as the origin of the universe or the fine-tuning of the universe and biological complexity, the sort of response that was kind of put into all of these is, if God is omnipotent, why not make a better universe? As far as the origin of the universe, the point of the argument is, if you have creation ex nihilo, if you can go back to a beginning of the universe, a being that is capable of bringing a universe into existence would be omnipotent. It would not be made of matter. It would not be bound by time, because time and matter and so on are coming into existence with the universe. So that's the point there. But if you're going to say, well, I can imagine how God could make it better. God could do this or God could do that. I'd like to know what atheists mean here, because now we're on a completely different argument, which is something else that I would say is required by us even having this conversation, having this debate. If Hina is pointing out that she can spot things that are wrong with our universe, and that a truly omnipotent being would be required to do if this being is really good, on what basis, right? In other words, think about this. If we're just going with sort of nature, the natural world, we kill and slaughter each other all the time. We see this. We know how this works. That's the world we live in. We have no experience of a world other than the world we live in. So how do we know this would be better if this were some other way? We're presupposing a kind of moral law here. Where do we get that? You don't get it on naturalism. In other words, let me put this differently. Given a naturalistic framework, where do we get our moral values, the things we appeal to and say, this is what a good being must do, and that is something a good being must not do? Where do we get that? You only have two ways. You only have two directions you can go to as a naturalist. You can say that certain patterns of thinking and values are sort of hardwired into us by the evolutionary process. So certain features of our ancestors helped them survive and reproduce, so a kind of herd instinct, helping out other members of the herd. Or you can say it's got something to do with society. So society indoctrinated us into thinking that this is right and that is wrong. Which one of those do you get to apply as some sort of objective standard that would apply even to God? And the answer is, if you really take your own worldview seriously, you couldn't apply either one of those and say this is what a deity would have to do. it would make no sense to say, here's what we're hardwired to do biologically, and therefore those are the rules that God must follow. I mean, a lion will enter into pride and kill off the children that were there previously. You don't say, well, if that's what helps that lion pass on its offspring and its genetic material, therefore it's the right thing to do. Well, if we developed in the manner that we're told by the naturalistic worldview, what sense would it make? What sense would it make to say, well, here's the way we think, and here's how we do things. This is what we're hardwired to do. Therefore, if God exists, that's what God must do. And similarly, if you're going to say, it's societal indoctrination, we hear as we're raised what our society tells us is right and wrong. That's not objective either. That's nothing you could apply to God. One society says do one thing, one society says to do something completely different. So atheists just don't have anything in their worldview that they can say, here's my worldview, but if God existed, here are the things that would apply to him. But we're all, and atheists in general, it's very rare. You find plenty of atheist philosophers and so on who will go on to say things like that. But among your average atheists, very quick to say, this is what God should have done this, and he should have done that, should have done this, and should have done that. And so we all have these sort of rules that we understand, that we are so confident in. We will say, these apply even to God. And what does that require? One, it requires that there are moral absolutes. You don't have them on that. You don't have moral absolutes on naturalism. So even in making the argument, you're presupposing an absolute moral standard. And you're assuming our knowledge, our access to them. Not just that there are certain things that are ultimately right and ultimately wrong, but we have some kind of access to them. We're special. We have a special awareness of things that other creatures and organisms don't have. And all of that would fit those sorts of an absolute moral standard and our access to them, that fits very comfortably into a theistic framework, doesn't fit very well into an atheistic framework. As far as human reasoning is concerned, Hina said that human beings can do things that are not traceable back to our ancestors. Well, we do, but as far as the structures of our physical structures and so on, there's only one way that sort of thing arises in naturalism, right? It's survival and reproduction. Whatever helped your ancestors survive and reproduce, those are the traits and characteristics that get passed on to the offspring, and that's what we have right now. The only reason we're here right now, according to naturalism, is our ancestors did a better job of surviving and reproducing. It's not because our ancestors had some ability to form correct hypotheses about the origin of the universe or about the ultimate nature of reality or whether God exists or doesn't exist. It has nothing to do with it. Whatever helps you survive and reproduce, that's what helps you pass on your genetic information. And so the structures that we have, our brains, our physical structures, that all gets passed down to us. And so I just don't know what she means with these that we have abilities that are not traceable back to our ancestors. How do we, you can learn karate or something like that from someone else, but as far as your physical makeup, that does come down from your ancestors. Hina said regarding consciousness that there's no such thing as a mental state that is different from a physical state. No, absolutely not. You can give examples of physical states that are tied to mental states, like pain, right? You get poked with a pin or something like that. It hurts. There's obviously a connection there. But there are mental states that just cannot be described. They can't be described in physical terms. Again, if I talk about if I'm thinking about a grilled cheese sandwich, it doesn't make any sense to say, look, you see these molecules right here? You see this pattern of molecules? That's about a grilled cheese sandwich. This other pattern is not. Or this pattern of molecules, that's true. This other pattern of molecules, that's false. What sense does it make to say that this arrangement of molecules is true and this other one is false? What could that possibly mean? But it makes perfect sense to say this belief is true and that belief is false. As far as logic, I didn't catch any additional response, I don't think. But Hina said something interesting, that debate is pointless because we're not going to change. And I find that interesting because, I grew up as an atheist, and now I'm not anymore. And a lot of that happened after I met a Christian who ticked me off so bad, I decided to destroy him, and then I started studying and then became a Christian. And Hina, of course, is a former Muslim who's now an atheist, so something happened along the lines that made her think otherwise. And so people do unquestionably change their minds and change their views. And the purpose of something like a debate like this isn't just an intellectual exercise or to meet new people. It's for both sides to be exposed to the reasons that the other side has for thinking the way they do and coming to some conclusion about maybe I'm on the wrong side here. So I hope that you guys, there's some atheists back there, will continue to think about these things, and maybe you agree with me.
One debate is not going to suddenly flip anybody's mind. A series of thoughts and processes and debates and discussions and information and society and exposure, that's what changes a mind. Maybe in David's case, he went to a single debate and suddenly his brain went, oh no, God, from atheism. But I know that for me personally, it took me years of self-reflection and thought and pondering, being challenged both gently and roughly by the people around me, because being a Muslim in this society is not easy in that way. It's a complex process. And that's exactly what brought about life. That's exactly what brought about the universe. It's a complex process rather than a single moment of creation. God is getting wedged out of explanations. I'm not sure what history we're looking at of theism. Perhaps we should exchange information later about what we're looking at. But God as an explanation is being wedged out. Before, as I mentioned, and I'm not sure if I had made myself clear enough, everything was attributed to God. And that was the end of the discussion. God made the rain. We pray for rain, and then rain doesn't come, God must be mad at us. These are things that are established within theistic canon, in every theistic canon. And to ignore that part of history and to say, all of a sudden in the 21st century, that theists never believed that the rain was caused by a deity is very ahistorical and very bizarre, I think. As far as the basis of morality goes, let me back up and quote what the word was used. Optimal. I didn't say that it was good or morally right for women not to die in agony in childbirth because of poor pelvic design. I'm just saying it would have been more optimal. So, as far as optimal goes, I'm thinking more along the lines of efficiency. It would be far more efficient to only have sperm meet egg when that would end up with a new life, rather than having so many happen and all of them just flushing out for no apparent reason. It would be a lot more efficient for the nerve in the giraffe to connect here instead of all the way around and up here. So it's not a moral good that I'm arguing, merely efficiency, which anyone with an engineering or design or software background will know human beings are really bad at. But even I, as a human being who's really bad at efficiency, even I can say that there is something kind of inefficient and not incredibly intelligent about some of the designs out there in the world. How do we know that it would be better for most things to not die? Well, because life is generally a good thing. Good. I don't know. I mean, it seems pretty reasonable on a very basic level that if you want to make something, you won't make it kill itself before it would come to life. That seems kind of ridiculous. But you know, who am I? Who am I to say that? As far as morality goes, to use the term hardwired with regard to human beings is incredibly flawed. There's very little that's hardwired into human beings. What makes us the dominant species on this planet is our plasticity, our ability to evolve and adapt, our ability to think about things and come up with innovative, creative solutions for all kinds of problems. I didn't say that none of our structures are traceable to our ancestors, but karate definitely is not traceable to the very first human beings that walked the African savannas. It was karate, or any other complex concept, comes from a progression of intellectual proceedings that sort of built on each other. So it started with someone saying, oh, man, that guy goes down faster if I hit him here instead of here. And then it built from there. We have thousands and thousands of years of recorded human history that shows us exactly how to get to karate or any other complex concept. As far as morality goes, I was kind of waiting for that one. The structures of morality that we see around us are not objective. I don't think that there is an objective morality because an objective morality very clearly does not exist. If an objective morality existed, then we wouldn't be disagreeing about it. Then we wouldn't be murdering and pillaging and doing all these awful things to each other over moral principles. So there is no objective morality that we know about. What we do know is that certain things make for a better society and a better survival for all of us. So instead of me stealing all your stuff and running off, I can say, all right, this is your stuff and this is my stuff. We good? Okay. Although, in certain societies, that's not what happens anyway. The bottom line is that there is no objective morality. We can see that in this world. And it's another symptom of, I think, poor design. If there were this optimal creator, why not make it so that we're a little bit less horrible to each other? Maybe a little tiny bit. But I guess that's just too much for this deity, if there exists one. Where is this mental state that David was talking about? He's saying, okay, so you have a thought and it's about grilled cheese, I believe. Where is this thought? Where does it exist? We know that he's telling us using sound waves in his throat to vibrate the air and sound waves to tell us that he's thinking about grilled cheese. But where does this thought exist? This thought does exist on a physical level, on the molecular level. And that molecule in itself definitely does not have a true or false value because people have false thoughts all the time. It's really easy to get people to think false thoughts. Ridiculously easy, as a matter of fact. But what David did was take this chemical signal in his brain and interpret it to mean grilled cheese. Now, if that same signal were to be placed, let's say if this were possible, in someone else's brain, someone who never heard of grilled cheese, they would get absolutely no meaningful information from it that would lead to grilled cheese, but it might lead to square thing with brown edges and yellow stuff peeking out. But the bottom line is that he interpreted this information, but the information does exist. There is a physical, traceable bit of information that he's getting that from. As for the idea that reproduction drives every single thing we do, sure, yes, naturalistically speaking, that's true. But we have very complex mating rituals these days. Very complex indeed. Being well educated enough to sit on a stage, might have been part of what led him to have his 4 fine sons. The fact that he was able to show his intellectual abilities and his health and his prowess in being able to do these things was probably not inconsequential towards his reproductive fitness. Of course, it's a little bit different for women, because if you want to pursue intellectual things, you wait till your womb's dried out and then you hope for the best. But everything in some way does lead to reproduction. What is part of the reason I joined the atheist community in the first place? To meet people. So it's not that there's this direct line between every single thing we do and having babies, but there is something behind everything that we do that does lead towards our species surviving and thriving and hopefully eventually reproducing. But there is no person on this planet who is at all reasonable who would say, oh, well, I'm a naturalist, and that means everything I do, every single thing I do is so that I can get someone pregnant or get pregnant. That's a very simplistic view of human psychology and biology. So I return again to uncertainty. Despite what has been said tonight, theists did explain everything via their God throughout human history, theists of all religions and pretty much every religion, and that explanation has slowly been retreating. Maybe someday we will have someone who can explain away the final cause of the universe in a way that is not theistic. I don't necessarily say that I have that answer, but I can say that it's highly likely, given the progression of human history, that we are going to get there. And I'd rather be on the right side.